Disclaimer. Opinions expressed are those of the content creators and do not represent any employer or entity. The information shared is for informational purposes only and should not be construed as medical advice or used in any legal capacity, including establishing standards of care. All efforts have been made to comply with HIPAA regulations. No guarantees are made regarding the accuracy of statements or opinions provided. Interaction with the podcast does not establish a doctor-patient relationship. Please enjoy this podcast responsibly.
Welcome back to Pod Patrol with your host, Dr. Jeff Belokin. On today's episode of Pod Patrol, we are joined by financial planner Jeff Belokin. He is a financial planner and investment advisor. He works with Wealth Building Strategies, a company in Tucson, Arizona. He is married to a physician and has firsthand knowledge of financial planning from an insider's perspective, being married to a physician, and gives a great interview today. Really dive deep into some of the intricate details of student loan management, financial planning. We even go into quite a bit of detail about index funds, ETFs, mutual funds, the differences, when you should dive into Roth IRAs and regular investment accounts. He is a great interview for us today, and I think he'll provide a lot of wealth and insight into doctors of all ages. So thanks to Jeff Belokin for joining me today. Enjoy. All right, joining me today is Jeff Belokin. He is a financial advisor. Thanks for joining me, Jeff.
You got it.
Jeff and Jeff today. Keep it easy. We can remember each other's names. So you are a financial planner. Why don't you kind of walk people through what you do on a daily basis?
Yeah, we're dollar monkeys. All we're trying to do is figure out what's the best way to deploy funds. And obviously that's going to be discretionary. It's going to be the stuff that's left over and the things that you already have saved. And so most people kind of have some baseline of a generic savings going. And so in those cases, we help them direct the funds if they're going in the right direction. Everyone has some direction that they're going in. Some people are poorly aimed.
Right. So
maybe what you think you're doing isn't going to get to where you think it's going to go. So you just kind of slightly steer them back on course. And in other cases, we try to help people increase their discretionary spending. So if you're overpaying you have a bad homeowner's insurance policy, or you have the wrong family health plan, which is costing you too much, or you just have holes in the bucket, so to speak. If we can plug those up, it creates discretionary dollars for us to then say, what are your objectives in life, and how do those dollars get reallocated? And so in a cheap way of looking at it, we essentially give your free dollars a job to do.
Sure. Makes a lot of sense. So specifically on our podcast, we have physicians, students, residents, and physicians, and you are married to a physician. That's actually how we know each other. So you have kind of a direct understanding of these things that we're going to talk about. But let's go back a little bit and talk about you real quick. So you're originally from Illinois.
That's right. West suburbs of Chicago.
All right. And then go Cubs go. Right?
That's right.
Yeah. You're not a Sox fan, are you? Yeah, exactly.
No.
Exactly.
They're pretty bad this year, which has been great for a Cubs fan. It's wonderful to watch how miserable the Sox are.
The Cubs aren't great, but the White Sox are historically bad.
Right.
Really bad. And so now you live in Arizona, and you, like we said before, you're a financial planner. So kind of walk us through where you went to school and kind of how you became a financial planner, how that came to be.
I remember screwing around with numbers back in the basement of my house. My dad would make me do it on a chalkboard in the basement where it was nice, cold, and damp. He would never leave the basement, of course, but I had one of those dads. So I kind of had I sort of had a rhythm with numbers early, whether that was born in me or kind of forced in me, one of the two. I stayed in Illinois for all of my scholastic years. I went to Illinois State University, did graduate with a finance degree. Went to banking after that, which leaves a lot to be desired. That was a good first place, I suppose. Not a very good resting place.
Sure.
And I actually came out to Arizona with the bank. So I actually transferred out from the Midwest to the West, I suppose, Southwest, with the bank. And then it just wasn't for me. I had a different rhythm in life, and I jumped out and started doing full financial planning with one of the oldest financial planning firms in the business, Waddell and Reed. And 7 or so years in, probably about 5 or so years in, we noticed some changes. Me and my business partner noticed some changes in the firm, and we just didn't want to stick around for what was going to come out the other end. So we jumped into the independent space, and we still do some financial planning. Most of it now is just intuitive for us. And one of the things that we learned with financial planning is people don't really stick around for it. We just kind of, unfortunately, we're in more of a microwave society than a dinner out of the oven society. And so the financial planning process will, while great, frankly, for a lot of people who don't have the bandwidth to do their finances themselves, it still requires people at the end of that process to fully take the advice of the planner. Otherwise, you're charging people for not doing the things that you ought to be doing, leading to more inefficient dollars. And so, like I mentioned before, we're dollar monkeys. We're just trying to help direct the dollars that you currently have going better, or find you the dollars. Those are the two objectives. And if we can do a good job with that, you're going to be doing just great. So we just tinker really at this point. It's harder than that, but the job is really making sure that you're still steering correctly, because you can get off track pretty easily, especially with how fast the moods and the markets move these days.
So I would expect that there's probably some broad principles that you kind of start with. So let's kind of broaden this back out for a minute here and talk to some people who are more science-based, more medical-based, and really have no idea what's going on with finances. There's going to be people listening who are students who don't care about money right now. They're hemorrhaging money. They don't want to think about it. They'll worry about that later, and that's what we did, and that's what most people do, and just say, okay, I'm on loans right now, I'm going to worry about it later. And then the residency, you're kind of starting to figure out, okay, I'm making a little bit of money, not a lot of money, but I don't want my loans to just get out of control, so maybe I'll do some income-based repayment type things. Don't have a lot of discretionary income at that point to invest. It's really the people who have been out in practice a little bit. So in my mind, where we can kind of help people a little bit is kind of just following some basic principles in school and residency, and then allowing the people that get out into practice as an attending really dive into the weeds. Let's say someone is a medical student and they really have no discretionary income. We have to keep in mind that every dollar that we spend, not just in school, but especially in school when you're living on loans, is not just $1. It's $1 plus X% of compounded interest over however many years it takes you to pay that dollar back.
Yeah.
So if it takes you a really long time, that $1 wasn't $1, it's $10 or $5 or whatever the math works out to be.
Opportunity cost.
Right, exactly. But is there anything you can think of other than just being frugal?
That's as the sign right above my finger would point from my father when I was getting into the business. He gave me that advice, and it always stuck with me. Just said, just tell people save their money. Don't be a dummy. I'm like, wow, way to cheapen the education and the testing and the licensing and the practicing and the servicing, and just say that, and you're home free. I suppose it's probably as simple as you can make it.
Right.
And he did it in about 3.5 seconds. So if you want something a little bit longer winded than something you can write on a whiteboard, the first probably, and I'll give it to you in an age range, probably until you're 35 or so, potentially 40, depending on how long you intend to work. You're really just looking at behavioral activity. You're right. There's just not a lot of dollars to shake out of a pocket that doesn't have anything in it. Mm-hmm. So if you're in school or just after school and you're in the residency program, what are you going to do? The best thing that you can do is build the best habits. Doctors are probably the prime example of just chaos in the first 10 years of their professional maturity, which I would include schooling in that.
Sure.
You're just way overworked, and I know that's the program, and I know there's utility to that. I'm not going to knock that, but you're way overworked. You have zero bandwidth effectively from age 19 when you enter your collegiate career, because you want to get into that doctor's program and you can't do it with a C average, right?
Right.
You're kind of working hard the second you graduate high school, frankly, before that, until 30 something. What I would tell someone who's just kind of getting going or who's interested in this podcast is just worry about the behaviors. If you can save a little bit of money, that's fine. If it's in a savings account, that's still fine. It really does kind of come down to this. If you can just do a little bit now, it will redound to your benefit later when the dollars are more serious. And so just get used to the right habits. And then eventually, when you have a little bit more bandwidth, when you have a little bit more time, certainly some more experience, you'd be surprised how you redeploy those types of things.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. So, living reasonably, it's so easy when you're a student becoming a resident and you get a little bit of money to think, oh, okay, now I have money, now I have a paycheck. And it's so easy to get a new car, buy a house and all these things, which is fine, which is, a car is never a good investment. A house can be a good investment. It also can be a money pit depending on where you buy and when you buy and what your interest rate is and whether the furnace is about to go out and whether the roof needs to be replaced, right? So that sometimes seems like a good investment, but it may end up losing you money depending on how long you stay in the house. So making good decisions from the get-go in terms of what car do I drive, where do I live, how much money do I spend, do I go out to eat, do I make food at home? All of those things are reasonable. And I've always thought that life is a balance. Speaking of things, sure, my parents would tell me, my mom would always say, you could get hit by a bus tomorrow. And I thought, geez, that is morbid, Mom. Like, come here. But the point is, you can't just live for tomorrow. You can't just wait. And then there may not be that tomorrow. There may not be that next day. So there is a balance there, I think, in terms of living versus saving versus just being smart with your financial decisions. Initially in these stages, these people are coming out with a significant amount of debt, and they have a few different options. One of the ways that you can repay your debt would be public student loan forgiveness, right? There are programs where you can get your debt paid off. There are nonprofit hospitals, VA hospitals, there's military programs. There's all kinds of things that are available for people to come out with little to no debt on the back end. Let's just say someone comes out of residency and they have quite a bit of debt. What are some basic principles for them to consider? Because when I came out of residency, my biggest question mark was, okay, I'm starting here. I'm at the starting line of my career. I have a huge amount of debt and no retirement. That's not entirely true. I had a little bit of retirement. We had a match in our residency, so I made the match just to not lose free dollars. I think that's a common sense thing. Is just if you can afford it at all, always get the match, always get the free money. It's a benefit. It's a perk. You're losing money if you don't do it. If you don't have the money, okay, maybe we need to make some other life decisions. But if you have the opportunity to get a match, whether it's in residency or in your job afterwards, make sure you're getting those match dollars. But we had very low retirement savings and very high debt. And so I'm sitting there thinking, okay, I can kind of do one of three things in my mind. I can put all my money towards the student loans, get it paid down as soon as possible. Or I can make the minimum payment on the student loan, throw everything at the retirement, because those are opportunity costs. The earlier you invest, the more years of investing, the more years of compounded interest and growth you have.
Yep.
So I'm sitting there stuck, and I still don't know the answer. That's why I'm talking to you. Maybe I'm too late to the party, but it still feels a little bit like, is there a right answer? Maybe it's 50-50. Maybe we ended up doing a little of this and a little of that because I wanted to not have a huge compounding interest loan, but I also didn't want to miss out on the retirement. What would you say to someone that had that thought?
Yeah, don't put all your eggs in the basket, right? I mean, it's usually used for investment purposes, but it's the same with discretionary dollars. If you have $1,000 left over at the end of the month, what do I do with it? Do I pay down some debt? Do I invest some dollars in Roth or wherever else it might be, pay down my house? It's a good question. I would, if you are working with a financial professional or CPA even can help you with this first bit, is play the tax game. If you just look at the tax brackets, and they're probably going to go up within a short amount of time. If you're playing the tax brackets, you can contribute to 401ks and things like IRAs to play your tax bracket game. So we have a progressive tax system, and so your first chunk of dollars is taxed at 10 and then 12, and then it kind of goes up. And if you make a lot, you're going to get taxed a bunch. And by the way, don't let that stop you from making a lot. Always make a lot if you can. But if you're on a cusp, and there's a big jump between the 12% tax bracket and the 22% tax bracket. If you're on that cusp, play the tax deductible game, save that 10%, which is probably more than the interest you're being charged on your student loan. So save the 10 and then go pay off your 6% loan or 7% loan or whatever that might be. The next significant jump is in the 20s. You go 22, and then there's another big jump at that point. And if you're you just kind of playing the game. If you can save some tax dollars, in a way, you're letting the IRS pay off your student loan. So this is one thing that you just might want to consider chatting with your CPA about. So that'd be one. The other thing I would do is you want to kind of keep things in perspective. If your student loan is not at a bad rate, I would almost argue making the minimums. And particularly with someone who's kind of new in the game, someone who's new in their income zone of life, you're going to have a dramatic change in your income projection from the moment you graduate to your first 15 years. It's going to go nuts. Why would you pay? Let me just frame it this way. If your annual student loan bill was $10,000, why would you pay more if you were making 120 grand a year? If you knew in 10 years you'd be making twice that and the payment was still going to be 10,000. You can pay with depreciated dollars in the future. This is kind of the mystery of the 30-year mortgage, right? Why does the 30-year mortgage make sense? By the way, I have a 15 full disclosure, so I believe in a lower rate as well. That's what I was chasing.
Sure.
But it's not really a problem if you don't overpay your mortgage, because this year you might be making 100,000, but 20 years from now you're going to be making 200,000 or 300,000. Your payment's still the same. You're paying with depreciated dollars. So use that interest game, and inflation's an interest game. Cost of living adjustment in your paycheck is an inflation game. You can play all of these numerical games, which is kind of where we try to frame things better for our clients. It's not a problem to pay the minimum, as long as you're not blowing the savings. So if your incremental decision is to say, my mortgage is $1,500, me and my wife are talking about maybe putting $2,000 towards a mortgage. Does that make sense? It might, but if you can't do those things, you've maxed out your 401k match, you've done your Roth IRA, you've picked up your life insurance because you got kids now or a spouse now. If you've done all of those other good things and you have legitimately extra money left over, okay, throw it towards a student loan, throw it towards a mortgage. That makes sense. But do all of the right things first. Pay the minimums, then do all of the right things. And if there's money left over at the end of that, then we can talk about your loans. Highest rate first, lowest rate last.
That makes a lot of sense. So I think that's the complicating part of all this is, I'm a little unique in that we're a 2-physician couple, which sounds great. It just means you have twice the amount of loans. So it's not that great. But we refinanced as soon as we got out of residency, and we were lucky at the time, and, COVID and the rates were low and all that stuff. So I had an adjustable rate refinance, which was great because it kept going down, down, down. I was like, this is awesome. It's going lower, lower, lower. And then COVID and then all that stuff. And it started to kind of creep back up. And then I refinanced to a flat rate, but they're much lower than some people's rates. And so the advice is going to vary. You can't just say, you do this, talking to everyone, because everyone's financial situation is going to be a little different. Maybe they got, maybe they have some bad credit and they have a car loan that's 12% or something. I just bought a car recently, and I was talking to the finance guy, and I said, what's the highest rate you've ever seen someone agree to? And he said 25%. It's like, what? I would rather walk. Where's my bicycle? Where's my Huffy? I'm not paying. Are you kidding me? 25%? That's ridiculous.
Ow. On a depreciating asset.
Exactly. You're going you're going to be underwater and you're never going to be above water. So
You were
underwater
one
means that
accident away from getting that thing repoed, and now you are walking.
exactly. Exactly. And
Man,
you owe the
that's
bank.
tough. That's
Yeah.
tough.
Terrible decision.
Tough.
Anyways, where was I going with this? So anyway, everyone has different interest rates on on their car, on their house, on their XYZ, on their, maybe they have student loans from undergrad, student loans from graduate medical education, whatever it may be. And so I think that that's where someone like you comes into play, because the numbers get murky in a hurry of trying to figure out which of these makes the most sense. And it might be simple. It might be like, well, I've got credit card debt at 22% and I've got a student loan at 5%. Well, I better pay that credit card down, because that's my best bang for my buck, saving 22%. Yeah. You're never going to find that on market. You're never going to get, at least not long-term, 22% returns. You guaranteed yourself 22% return on a loan that you are paying 22%. You're guaranteed to not pay that 22% or whatever the X percentage rate might be. So I like to think of it that way sometimes too, is whichever one has the highest rate, I'm guaranteeing myself that return by not paying that amount the next month thereafter.
Mathematically sound principle, 100% correct.
Sure.
So if you just kind of take a piece of scratch paper, legal pad, whatever you got, cocktail napkin or your mirror, just line out. All you have to do is put options A, rates B, line up what the options are on the left side. So you have a credit card, you have a car loan, you have another car loan, you have a mortgage, a student loan, and also in there, rank your investments. I'm making, past 3 years, I was averaging 9% on my Roth IRA, or my bank account was paying me 3%, because money market yields aren't that bad anymore. Mm-hmm. Range everything that you send your money towards, whether it's a credit card or whether it's an investment. Put all of those things on the left side of the ledger. On the right side of the ledger, mark the affiliated interest rate. Your credit card's at 19, your car's at 9, your house is at 6, all of that. And then just simply sort them based on rate. And that'll tell you where your extra dollars goes. Mm-hmm. It's just that simple. Now you have to make all your minimums, kind of like what I was saying before. Make all the credit card payments, make all the student loan payments, make all the car payments. We're talking about the extra. Once you get past making the $50 minimum on your credit card and the $1,500 on your house, what do you do with the extra $500? That's how you prioritize based on interest rates, and you're going to get the most bang for your buck. And if you do that, the one thing that I think you'd appreciate because you already think this way, which is great. When you prioritize this, there should be two different 401k lines. The 401k number with the match and the 401k number without the match. With the match, it's going to read something like 107%. And without the match, it's going to read something like 7% or whatever your rate of return is. Because with the match, and you mentioned this, you're getting 100% bang on your buck there. You put in $5, they put in $5. Whatever it grows. But at least get the match. Even if you just put your 401k in cash, you're doubling up. I mean, that's house money at the casino, right? Just pocket that every single time. Dealer bust, dealer bust, dealer bust. You're fine.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's free money. So
why wouldn't you sit at that poker table?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
They're going to bust every time. Right.
Exactly. So I was writing down a couple thoughts here as you were talking. So what do you think about leveraging debt? So debt doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. So some of the most wealthy people leverage debt, and you can explain that better than I can. But my understanding would be, let's say you buy a property, you buy a strip mall that costs $1 million. Well, now you're $1 million in debt, but you are then getting money in return for owning that asset that is essentially paying off the tenants of that strip mall are paying the bank for you. If you do it well, maybe you come out ahead and you're even pocketing some money. But basically, the loan, in theory, could be costing you $0. On $1 million loan, I owe the bank $9,000 a month or something, or $7,000 a month. I don't know what it is. It depends on your rate and your years and all the things.
It's a lot of money, though.
Right. And so but all the tenants are then covering the cost of that. And I'm the middleman. They're paying me, and then I'm paying the bank. So what are your thoughts on that? Not necessarily from a strip mall, but like, owning a
rental
house,
house, or
a
yeah,
rental house, but even your own house, not necessarily leveraging debt in your own house, but that is an asset. You're building equity. You're saving that money, even though that feels like the money's going out every month. There's a portion of that you're maintaining as an asset. So what are your thoughts on using debt to your advantage?
yeah. Great question. And there's a lot of people that get into this sort of thing, and the competition is really tight. And so the competition, by the way, is going to mean you're playing in a game where there's a lot of pros, and there's a lot of people who don't do it well, and you don't want to be that because you'll get chewed up and spit out.
Right.
So there's a right way to do that, of course. What my general advice would be to get help. Make sure that you have the right tax advice. Make sure you have the right legal advice. You don't want any of these things coming back from a tenant perspective to come back and bite your families in the butt.
Mm-hmm.
You take the risk, that's fine. But if it's going to bite your spouse in the butt, if your kid's life is going to be adjusted, you got to just go into it carefully.
Right.
You just want to stick with your core competence. And I'll say this from a generic investment perspective, which ties into kind of the question that you're asking. Probably the most successful investors, and certainly Buffett would fit into this. I know he's ancient, but man, he's gospel.
Yeah.
The guy's got it right. I mean,
Yeah.
can't argue with it.
He keeps winning.
Every time you flip the paper over, it's another win for Buffett.
Yep.
Focus on income. And it kind of speaks into what you're talking about, because a tenant property obviously is going to produce income. The hope is that it produces income greater than your expenses. And more times than not, if you do the math right, you'll be right. But there is a risk buried in that. The tenant leaves, the building has some maintenance issues, there's termites, or whatever the case might be, you're just going to have to deal with that. Right. As long as what you're doing is focused on income, you're probably going to be okay. Doesn't mean you will necessarily be okay at every time you take that picture, that Polaroid picture. You could have a bad quarter. We're going to have another recession at some point. Things are going to happen. But if you're purchasing assets, if what you're going for is income, you're going to be just fine. So that's kind of what you're looking for. The asset versus liability conversation is, when I try to figure out my net worth, is it going up? That's an asset. Is it going down? That's a liability. That's just how you make the math. Sure. And so a lot of people try to complicate it more than that. It's just really not that complicated. Maybe figuring out your net worth might be, you just have to do a bunch of math. But just focus on income and you should be fine.
So as we go through our careers, we will kind of accumulate some assets. High-income professionals are constantly looking for ways to beat the system, pay less tax dollars, put their money somewhere where it's protected. So what are some investment vehicles that are the least risky, moving to some that are more risky? So the least risky in my mind is like your 401k. And then you make the decision like 401k versus Roth, right? So why don't you explain some, just in case people are kind of not understanding that, why don't you explain the difference between Roth IRA and 401k?
Sure. One quick distinction before I get into that. The least risky thing to do is accumulate assets in your name. On occasion, you can accumulate assets in kind of this shadowy, Kabbalic kind of a thing. There's deferred comp plans, which technically stay in the possession of your employer. That would inherently be more risky than a 401k plan. Even though the math could work out better, by the time you retire, that company could be garbage. If you were a 30-year employee of Boeing and you retired, and the next day you heard that doors were falling off of planes, how good do you feel about that pension?
Right.
If they can't fly planes, pension's gone. I mean, that's just how that. So anytime you can acquire assets in your name, that's going to be less risky automatically than ways to accumulate assets not in your name. So and again, one of those examples would be deferred comp plans. There's employer-based plans, and it's not in your name. And so if you get to that moment of retirement, and it's a speak now or forever hold your peace sort of a decision, it can be daunting. If you choose the wrong path, you're kind of stuck with that path. If you blow it, you blow it. Hopefully you don't. But at least you did it. And you didn't have to rely on anybody else. And, kind of given the folks that would listen to this podcast, they believe in that sort of thing. No one gave them their badge, right? No one gave them their their degree, they're successful people. They're competent, capable people. Bet on yourself. That's what I would say. So kind of going back, sorry, I totally whiffed on that question. What are the other types of accounts?
I was going to bring you back. I was going to circle you back. Come
Reel
on
me
back.
in. It's been a while since I've gone fishing, but I can't wait to go again. 401ks are a great way. Again, anything that would be in your name. The generic advantage of a 401k is any contribution that you put in is going to be matched. But the real benefit to this, I should say the second benefit to that, because that is the real benefit. The second benefit to that is all of these contributions are what they call above the line deductions. And so you don't get taxed on any of that going in, which is great. If you're a high income professional, like you were just talking about, this is a wonderful thing. Your tax rate stinks. It's 20 some odd percent federally. It's single digits, probably 5 or whatever odd percent to the state. You got all your property taxes and sales taxes. By the time you add it all up, you're probably paying, maybe a third or more of whatever you've earned to some government somewhere. So you've paid a lot in is the point. Don't feel bad about any of that. Just don't pay more. Don't choose to pay more. And so if you put money in a 401k, you get to get it out of that system for now while your income is high and while your income tax bracket correspondingly is high. You want to defer taxes on that. Once you do that, you get back to this discretionary dollar theory, which is what good do I do now that I've done that? Now that I've done the basic stuff, my minimum stuff, which getting your 401k match is a minimum thing. Do that. Then you can do additional tax deferred accounts. You can do additional tax favored accounts. You can invest in ongoing municipal bonds, which are generally speaking not taxed. They're kind of taxed a little bit, but very, very, very low, typically speaking. You can get into totally deferred accounts through life insurance. You can get into MLPs, which are going to be predominantly accounts or investments that pull stuff out of the ground, like oil and things like that. There's all types of different ways you can get involved. But one of the fundamental questions you're going to have to ask yourself is, do you want to pay? And this is kind of a salesy line, so I apologize. That's why I'm balking on it now. I don't sell things very well. Not my thing. Would you rather pay tax on the seed, or would you rather pay tax on the harvest? Concept being, you can pay no tax on this, or would you rather pay no tax on this? Right? The corn seed versus the corn stalk. Which would you rather pay tax on? I think most people would rather say, tax me on the seed. I got $1, go ahead and tax me on it. But when it grows to 100, do you want to be taxed? And I'd rather not. If you can choose, you'd rather pay tax on 1 than pay tax on 100. And you already know the name for this. It's a Roth. There are Roth IRAs that you can invest in as an individual, almost anywhere. You're going to have a Roth component inside of your 401k. How do you play that game? I would still go out and get your deductible match. Go get that. I would leave that on the deductible side. And then anything above and beyond that, you can do over in the Roth side. But you're going to play that tax rate game. So it's a little hard to give you a rule of thumb.
Yeah.
But I would just say, whatever the match is, obviously do that. Get your tax deduction on that money.
Yeah, so it's whether you pay tax on it now or pay tax on it later.
It's a significant difference. It is absolutely material. If you're a 20-year-old and you're listening to this, if you're 25 and you're listening to this, the asset that you're playing with is time, and you have a ton of it. If you're 55 years old and you're listening to this, there's still reasons to do it. You should absolutely still invest in Roth, whether it's going to be an IRA or it's going to be inside your 401k. The advantages are a little bit muted if you're 55 or so. But if you're a young person and you're listening to this, you should get involved in a Roth IRA or a Roth 401k as soon as you can. The long-term benefits of this are immeasurable. They're immeasurable. If I have a client who's got $1 million IRA, not uncommon. Great problem to have, by the way. If you took out $1 million in an IRA, you're going to get hammered. Absolutely hammered. You probably have $600,000 left. And no one's going to cry for that person either.
Right.
But
because you're talking about taxes. You're talking about the taxes that are going to get hit when they draw that money out.
It's a big fee.
Yeah.
And the IRS will get it. There's just no way. But if you had $1 million Roth IRA, you're swimming.
Right.
You got $1 million bucks.
Because it's
Can't
actually
take that
$1
away
million.
from you.
Now, they do put some caps on the Roth amounts per year, and they are some phase-out income limits. I don't remember what they are, but if you make a certain amount of money, then they won't let you directly contribute to a Roth IRA. You have to do something called a backdoor Roth IRA, which is not that complicated once you have the IRA set up, and then you do your conversion of a set amount per year that you can convert to a backdoor Roth IRA.
Yeah.
But it's like a silly loophole. It's like, why even have the law if there's going to be the loophole? Let's just let people do it a certain amount rather than having to go through all these
Weird.
circuitous route that's legal, but the direct route is not legal.
It's weird. Yeah, they blew it.
Yeah.
They blew it.
Government bureaucracy. Yeah. So, but there are some caps on how much you can contribute to a Roth IRA, because at the end of the day, the government wants their money. They want it now. They're hemorrhaging money, right? They need money in to pay money out, Medicare, Social Security, all the programs, everything that the government spends money on. We won't make this a political talk on all that stuff, but they need to have that money, so they don't want everyone, hiding their money from the tax advantage accounts. They want to get a decent chunk of their money when they can get it. So investing in a Roth system makes a whole lot of sense. Knowing that you can't just contribute an indefinite or unlimited amount to the Roth system, but utilizing that as a good tax feature. So 401k is an employer sponsored, might be a 403b. These are just numbers and jargon that just means basically employer-sponsored retirement account. There's some different ones as well, but most common 403b, 401k. Correct me if I'm wrong. If you're working kind of smaller group, private practice, you may not have access to those accounts. And then people would open up an IRA, so an individual retirement account, which just means it still could be with the same place,
Yeah.
Principal, Charles Schwab, TD Ameritrade, go on and on and on and on.
Right.
And it just means that you're opening up a retirement account. So what would be the benefit of someone opening up an IRA versus just keeping their money in a savings account or somewhere where they would have easy and quick liquidity to their assets?
Yeah, I mean, part of that is to get it out of the easy and liquid thing, right? That means you can go on that vacation that you shouldn't be taking or buying that car that you shouldn't be buying.
Right.
The reality is there's going to be a point in time in which you retire and there's going to be a lot of life left. Wasn't always the case. You go back 100 years, there wasn't years after retirement. There were typically days. You typically worked until the grave. And so these days you kind of have to begin with the end in mind and forcing yourself, again, good behavior. When you're young, forcing good behaviors will have long-term benefits. If you can kind of get into the rhythm of good behavior, savings is one of those, then it will redound to your benefit in untold ways later on in life. You just have to be able to see it. It's right. It's do I eat the marshmallow now, or if I wait, I get two? Wait. Just you don't have to wait long, but wait, and you'll get two, or you get three. With the compound interest thing, you'll probably get 10. So, and who wouldn't want 10 marshmallows? So you're right. You have the 401k at work. Generally speaking, you're probably going to have access to that. And if you genuinely are a solo practitioner, you have a concierge practice or a consultation practice or something, and it's just kind of you, maybe a mom and pop or something, you can open up your own 401k. It's a solo K. You don't just have to rely on an IRA to do it, individual retirement account. You can rely on an individual 401k, and your contribution limits are huge, just like a regular standard issue 401k. We're mentioning a lot of names of account types here. Just to kind of put it in perspective, these are just the wrapper around your investment. It's not actually an investment. And so the wrapper just tells the IRS what rule book to flip to when the money comes out. An IRA is not in and of itself an investment. A Roth IRA is not in and of itself an investment. You could put cash in these things. Cash is kind of an investment, kind of not, right? But no one thinks I'm investing in cash at Wells Fargo, right? Or Bank of America. They think I have my Apple stock. That's an actual investment. Both of those things can go into an IRA. So the wrapper, the IRA, the 401, the Roth, that just tells the IRS what to do with your money when you want it back. Yeah. That's all it says.
So I think that's
the investment.
I think that's a really good point, because you can have the same exact investments, And let's dive into that here in a second,
Yeah.
because I think sometimes you and I, you way more than me, understand all of these things, and we're kind of glossing over maybe some of the basic things. So let's kind of go back to some basics here in a second. But inside of each of those investment vehicles, 457, 403b, 401k, even IRA, anything, you can pick, like you said, Apple, Microsoft, Google, and
Yeah.
then a conglomeration. That's too fancy of a word. I shouldn't have used that word. I'm sorry. I'm going to take that out later. A collection of stocks can be called either an ETF, exchange traded fund,
Right.
or a mutual fund,
Yes.
typically. And then there's something called an index fund. So will you walk us through the difference between an ETF, a mutual fund, and an index fund?
Yeah, I mean, they're all going to invest in a basket or a chili pot of stocks or of bonds. It depends on what the mandate of that fund is. You can have a index on, say, the S&P 500. That makes sense
Which
to a
is,
lot of people. They kind of hear that
yeah, which
index
is the collection of the 500. Is it biggest
largest.
or best, or is it largest?
Yeah, largest. Yeah, largest.
500 largest companies it's all in America, right? It's all in the United States.
The S&P 500 is American companies. Yeah.
Right. So the 500, think of them as like the 500 ones that you probably want to put your money in.
Yeah.
So they're
You've
going
heard
to
of
do it.
most of the names. You've heard of
Right.
most of the names. They're really big. You drive by the stores. Those are typically the ones.
Yep. Target, Google, Amazon, all those things.
All those
so
guys.
they take those
tons.
and they put them in it. Basically, the index fund follows the performance of all of those on average.
Yes.
Basically, over time, some go up, some go down.
Yep.
Hopefully more go up than go down. And with time, the index fund is going to follow the production or the success of those top 500 companies.
That's right.
That's an index fund.
That's right. That's right. So if you go to yahoo.com/finance and Google does the same thing, and MSN does this, all of them do the same thing. And you're typically going to find the SPX or the ticker on the top that says S&P 500 or Dow Jones Industrial Average or NASDAQ. If you just click on it, you'll see the line, do the up and down thing. And if you scale back far enough to get a decade view or a 2-decade view or a 3-decade view, it just goes up to the right. It's real bumpy in between. A lot of people complained about the president. A lot of people complained about taxes going up. A lot of people complained about whatever they complained about. But generally speaking, here's the one thing you'll always know. All of the companies that are publicly traded, every single one, and I would say probably all of the private ones as well, harder to gauge those though, they're made for one thing, profit. That's the game. Some other things get in the way, and each company does things a little bit differently. That's the dynamism of the market. And even though you have a downtime in the market, it's been a bad quarter, the Fed's changing interest rates, right? What happened over in Iran? All of these things get into the pot, and that's why the line goes just nuts. If you followed it every day, you'd lose your mind. But if you back up far enough, the principle's still the same. Can this company make money? If they can make money and you're in it, it's probably going to go up and to the right. And the only couple things that get in the way are advisor fees, index fees, ETF, mutual fund fees, and taxes. Mm-hmm. As long as you understand those things going in, you're probably going to do just fine. Those are indexes, and you can invest in indexes. They're awfully cheap because there's no management. You just kind of buy the basket, and whatever the basket does is what you're going to do. If you're okay with that ride, and it's a ride, then that's fine. You're good. You'll pay virtually nothing. You'll get the ride that you're on, and hopefully enjoy it by the end or by the time you need the money. ETFs and mutual funds are very, very similar. They do a lot of the same things. They segment. And so you can buy, of the S&P 500, you just want to do growth companies, or you just want to do value companies, or dividend companies, or you just want pharmaceutical companies, or you just want technology or utility companies. You can segment, if you take the index at large, you can segment the 50 that you want or the 100 that you want based on how they fit into different buckets. And so if you kind of have an inclination towards this, I think, for example, I think it's going to be a bumper year for energy. And go for it. And you can sprinkle a little money over there. I think real estate's going to have a good year. You can sprinkle a little bit of money over there. All of these are public companies. You still have heard of them probably, but you can concentrate into these market sectors by using mutual funds and ETFs. The difference between ETFs and mutual funds, there are several. Probably the most explained, the easiest one to grasp would be with a mutual fund. You have a investment manager, usually a team of investment managers, sitting on top of the basket. And even if they own Apple inside of the basket, they can say, I want more or I want less. And there's someone actually looking at the balance sheets and looking at these things saying more or no. And so you pay a little bit more for the mutual fund for the expertise, for the experience, the wits, let's say, of a team of professionals who've studied this sort of thing to know when to get in and when to get out of something. An ETF can do a little bit of that, but really it's just there to market segment. There's not a ton of oversight inside of the ETF, and so they tend to be a little bit cheaper than mutual funds, but you can still target market a sector.
Sure. And so just to kind of summarize that, because I think that was a lot of information there, very good information, but a lot of information. So the main difference is that the ETF is just kind of set it and forget it. And it could be a sector, and the mutual fund is actively managed. Like you said, someone is making changes in there.
Yeah.
And the goal, essentially what you're paying for, the difference between a set it and forget it and the mutual fund is that in theory, the person managing or team managing it is doing a good enough job to more than offset the cost, the basis points, the cost of that mutual fund versus the ETF. So they're saying, yes, we cost more, but let me tell you why. If you look at our returns, our active management made the right decisions, and the set it and forget it earned 6%. But we earned 9%. So even with the subtracting out the extra cost of the mutual fund, we're worth it because we came out with a higher percentage rate. And at the end of the day, that's all you really care about. So I think some people get scared off by mutual funds because they cost more money, which you could make an argument either way. I tend to have more ETFs than mutual funds. But you could certainly make the argument that mutual funds are worth it as long as they're proving that they're coming out ahead and they're more than justifying the added cost of what those active managers are doing.
That's right. Yeah, not all mutual funds are created the same. They're all publicly traded, and so you can find all of the public data on them. And so you can actually segment all of the companies that produce, say, large cap growth mutual funds, and you can sort them. Morningstar is a great example. You can go to morningstar.com and they'll actually rank them for you.
Sure. And so one of the benefits of doing these, whether it be an ETF or a mutual fund, the sectors we'll call them, would be if you took the S&P 500 or the Dow Jones, whatever it may be, you're going to have to take some good with the bad. And when you narrow it down to a sector, whether you're trying for growth or, like you said, pharmaceutical or oil and gas, if you think, okay, solar is going to be big in the next couple of years, everyone wants free energy. Well, I'm going to invest in a solar ETF. The idea is that those stocks, this is all theoretical, do not take this advice, the stocks in that sector are more prime for growth. They're starting lower with more ceiling than, say, the Apples, the Googles, the Amazons that have already maybe made a lot of the gains.
Yeah.
So percentage wise, if you look at the growth of the S&P or the Dow Jones, it may be rising over time, but they're making incremental growth. Whereas if you are able to identify a sector with a lot of growth, if they're starting at $2 and they're going to grow to 100, that's a lot different than 100 percentage wise growing to 200. Even though they almost grew about the same percentage wise, the 2 to 100 grew a significant amount percentage wise higher than the 100 to the 200.
That's right.
So you're trying to maximize your returns based on these sectors. Now, the risk with that's what we need to talk about real quick, could be the risk. It's not all sunshine and roses. When you do that, you're opening yourself up to the opposite, which is if the stocks go down, it's going to go down a lot more. So there is some benefit of what we call diversification. So why don't you talk about diversification and what that means and why it's important?
Yeah, I mean, if you going back to eggs in a basket, if you put all of your eggs in one basket, it could end up really well for you. If you started investing in NVIDIA in 2015, I mean 2019, that'd have been great. If you invested in Bitcoin in 2015, I mean, you're retired. There's a number of different ways where the story goes really, really well. There's also, more times than not, the story goes really poorly.
Right.
And so you can end up with an Enron. There's a lot of companies that fail. Most of them, frankly, do. There's not a lot of companies that make it 100 years, and the ones that do are much different than where they started. Times change. Things change. And so companies get bought out. All types of things happen. Bad management certainly occurs, human errors in here. But if you're going to go on the ride, occasionally it's going to go down. And so you just have to weigh that out. If you put your eggs in different baskets, if you diversify out, one of the things you're trying to find is uncorrelated assets.
And the problem with that is if it goes down, let's just say you have all your money in one basket, it goes up, 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 and then 6 months before your retirement, it just tanks and goes whoop all the way back down to where it started. Now you have nothing, right? So you've put all of your money into one option, and that one thing went down at a time where you did not want it to go down. Now we'll talk about that in a minute, of how you change your asset allocation as we get closer to retirement, so that doesn't happen. But diversification kind of combats that a little bit. It kind of broadens your risk. If one tanks, well, then maybe the other 9 kind of stayed the same or went up a little bit, so you're not riding that wave all the way down.
That's right. There's any number of reasons why good investments go bad, and if you have too many things in that one spot, then you're just in trouble. And that's fine if you got enough time on your hands and that company can come back. You're probably going to be in fine shape. But if it doesn't, you're not in good shape. And you're right. The closer you get towards retirement, obviously the less risk you can take. It's too costly on your 60th birthday or 62nd birthday to have that 2008, 2009 kind of year, or more recently 2022.
Right.
And if you retired in something like, say, June, July, or August of 2008, which, by the way, the bottom was in March 2009. So if you'd retired in that 2008 window and you didn't change your portfolio, you were toast. I mean, the decision is essentially done. You can't, your 65th birthday, you wanted to line up with Medicare, you got all that stuff right. Bam, you retired, feeling good. You and the spouse went on vacation, long deserved, long earned. You get back, the market's garbage. Your kids lost their jobs. You can't go back into the workforce.
Right.
Unemployment's 10%.
Yeah.
You're expensive. So you just kind of have to be more careful. So maybe one of the things that you're trying to get to here is when you're younger and you have 3, if not 4 decades of work ahead of you, and your money goes up 100% and comes back down 60%, that sucks. You're fine.
Right.
Next Friday, you're still going to get paid. Right.
Yep. And
Friday after that, your spouse is going to get paid. Life's
and
okay.
You think of it like at that moment, you're investing at a discount. I think some people get scared away when they expect something to go up, 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 up. Well, then that asset is becoming more and more expensive for you as you're investing.
Right.
If it's going down, that's not bad, because as long as you don't sell, you haven't lost anything. As long as you keep investing, your dollar cost averaging, which means you're investing at a number of different points along the ride.
That's
if
right.
If you have $100,000 for that I've saved up, I put it in cash and I'm going to invest it for retirement. It has the same investment date. $100,000 has the same purchase price and one purchase price and one sale price. That might be good or it might be bad.
Could be real bad.
Right. But over time, your dollar cost averaging, you bought some that were expensive, some that were cheap, and hopefully over time, those have averaged out so that it's up over time. So I think those are kind of important principles, but I'll let you continue.
It's a principle that plays out beautifully in the 401k world. Right? So back to your $100,000 example, you could put it all in on January 1, or you could do $8,500, $8,300 on the first of every month. And if you did that, the first of every month, you put in, call it $8,000, you could be buying at bad opportunities because the stock went up, or you could be buying at remarkable opportunities because the stock went down. For no reason that's identifiable. That's just what happened. Mm-hmm. And so when you do it a number of times, inevitably, you're going to be purchasing a lot of good opportunities, some bad. But again, if your holding period is long enough, it all looks good. You just want to be able to take advantage of the cheap opportunities when they come, because your ROR is going to be so much better. Mm-hmm. And if 401k does that better than any other institutional account because you're either paid every week or every other week. You're buying all of the time. And if you consider your dividends and coupons that are reinvesting inside of your account, you're constantly purchasing shares. This is a great thing. You're almost constantly doing DCA, dollar cost averaging. Don't try to time the market. On occasion, you'll win, but more times than not, you won't. Again, go back to the blackjack example. How do you just sit there and think, I got one black chip. I could either break it out into $5 chips and DCA my gambling experience, or I could go all in right here.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, go ahead.
So people go broke. People go broke in a hurry.
It could work.
That's what I do. I just go, okay, I'm out of money. Now I'm going back to the bar.
The ATM won't give me any more.
Yeah, I'm done.
Last chip. Here we go. I got to make dinner.
So as people are moving towards retirement, they are, whether willfully or letting someone else do this for them, they are changing their investments from a risky investment to a less risky investment. So something changing from maybe stocks to bonds would probably be the simplest thing. You mix in ETFs and mutual funds and growth funds and target date funds and all these things. But essentially, you're going from, when you're younger, you can tolerate more risk. You might as well roll the dice a little bit. If it doesn't turn out your way, you've got a lot more opportunities down the road, versus the closer you get to retirement, you don't want to take that risk. It's not worth it. You want safe, reliable returns, even if they're much lower. I'll take 2.5%, 3% guaranteed, as opposed to maybe 8, maybe 12, but maybe -10.
Right.
I don't want to take that risk. So essentially, that's what we're talking about. As we're getting closer to retirement, we're making our investments much less risky, so that you don't have that catastrophe the closer you get to retirement.
Right. For most people, you're not going to retire a billionaire. You know, if things go poorly for a billionaire, they're going to be fine. Most people are going to retire with, these days, hundreds and hundreds of thousands. In our client book anyway. Frankly, statistically, most people are going to retire with not much. It's pretty sad. But for those who have kind of scrimped and saved and done their duty, for 30, 40 years of a work career, you're going to have some money saved up. The problem with retiring and leaving your dollars at risk, let's say, invested like when you were 30, is it's not uncommon to lose 20, 30% in a year. But the reason why you want to get more conservative when you're retired and you're not a super millionaire, billionaire, whatever, is if you're taking out money, say you're distributing 5% of your retirement base, a little bit high, we like 4%, but let's just call it 5 to keep the math easy. And you didn't change your portfolio and you had a 2008, which, by the way, the S&P 500, the big one, was down about 40%, 39 point something percent. Put the numbers out there. If you started with $1 million in retirement and you took out 5%, that was your distribution rate. You took out 50,000, and the market went down 40. So you lost another 400,000 in that year. In 2008, let's say your account balance went from 1 million to 550,000, and you still need 50 grand the next year. $50,000 off of 550 grand is a much different distribution rate, 10%, than it is off of a $1 million portfolio, which is 5%. And you're not typically making 10% retirement. They call that a sequence of returns risk. You're in the toilet bowl, and it's only a matter of time before you're kaput. Some things are going to happen, but you just can't afford those big years. You got to try to keep your losses to the single digits. You just have to. Otherwise, it's just too damaging to get back. Makes a lot of sense.
So I think we have gone more than in depth for people. So hopefully this was helpful. Yeah, exactly. He's pointing to "Don't be a dummy, save your money," quote from his father. So, I think this has been probably very helpful for some people. Probably some people listening are like, what the heck are they talking about? So save this, listen to it again, wait 5 years, listen to it again. It's going to be extremely beneficial, because these are the kind of basic principles that you need to start saving for retirement and not making some catastrophic mistakes along the way that you wish that you knew about ahead of time. Because once you make the catastrophic mistake, once you lose that 40%, first year of your retirement, you can't go backwards. There's no like, I want to undo that. It's like, nope, that
Doesn't work that
go
way.
that way. So knowing the principles when you're as young as possible, which gets me onto soapbox of like, why do we not teach some of these basic principles in undergrad, have some basic required finance courses in undergrad, in high school? Why don't we do that? Beyond me. But I think we've done a really good job kind of touching on all these things. So I want to thank you for your time today and your knowledge and expertise for us. If people wanted to reach out to you or get some more information from you, what would you tell them?
Phone's fine. Email's great. Website's cool too. Jeff Belokin. You can find me online, I'm sure. BELOKIN. WBS.us.com is the website. Go ahead and drop us an email. Drop us a message on that. It'd be pretty easy for us to get back to you. And the last little nugget I'd give people is try to avoid mistakes that involve a comma. You can do that. You'll be fine.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate your time. Thanks for joining me today.
You got it, Jeff. Be good.
All right. Bye now. Thanks for joining us on another episode of Pod Patrol with your host, Dr. Jeff Belokin. Until next time.